Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers and sisters, inshallah, wherever you are, I pray that you are well. This is the second webinar. Yesterday, we covered rewiring, the importance of rewiring. And today, we are just going to cover the importance of rewilding and why rewilding is part of the principles of Heartsea International. So when we look at Heartsea, it's broken down into the first principle is to rewire, the second principle is to reconnect to the natural world, the third principle is rewilding, and then we go into the redesigning and the re-establishing, inshallah ta'ala, the divine order on earth. And before we can get to rewilding, we have to at least be going through that process, which we explained yesterday, of rewiring, which is that continued process. And really, in a nutshell, the rewiring is tazkir ad-nafs. And so straight away, it means a continual effort to not just to rewire, but to change our whole way, our external as well as, more importantly, our internal being. So today, the importance of understanding rewilding. Okay, so let's start with the first slide, please, Brother Hamidou. Once again, Jazakallah khair to Brother Hamidou, who's in Bangladesh, who's again put the whole slides together. Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him and keep him safe and secure. So what is rewilding? Okay, so let's just look at this particular slide here. So this is a beautiful picture, and it shows, basically, it shows biodiversity in its fullness, okay, and lots of ecosystems there, lots of animals, lots of birds, and so this is the ideal situation that we want to be in. So, but the situation that we are in is that, sadly, and we was explaining yesterday, that we are in a crisis of perception of how we are seeing the world. And we, as a species, because we are a species, we are a human species, and we are just part of a wider community of ummah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, that we are now living in a world where we are now completely disconnected from the natural world, okay? And this is a great concern. And the reason is because we are seeing the world, we are programmed to see the world, we are being conditioned to see the world through a certain lens. And I was explaining that yesterday. And the only way that we can re-establish contact, reconnect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ayah signs, is by seeing through the Quranic lens. Okay, so rewilding is about changing us first, because obviously, how can we rewild and go through this process if we haven't rewired? And it's about doing the practical aspect as well, which is part of the role as the Khalifa, okay, which we haven't stepped up to. Inshallah, one day we will, in bringing the natural ecosystems together. Okay, next slide. So let's just be very clear, brothers and sisters, that life on Earth is experiencing destruction. Let's just be very honest. Life on Earth is crying out in pain. And we as a species, we are as insan, we are the culprits, we are the ones that is causing destruction on Earth. Every time a tree gets cut down in a tropical rainforest, every time a bird loses its habitat, or a deer, every time we've polluted the ocean, and we wipe out and we reduce a species in population, and we cause a species to go extinct, then what we have done as insan is to eliminate an ayah, a verse of the Al-Quran al-Taqwini. So by saying it like this, I'm hoping that makes you alert. Okay, if we, if we had the Quran and the enemies of our deen were to take out verses, and it can never happen because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always protects the Quran. But let's just say something did happen. It would be impossible for us to connect to the Quran. It would be impossible for us to be able to understand the language of the Quran, to be able to recite the Quran. So how could we iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq? Okay. There would be no point of starting with alif ba ta tha jim ha kha. There would be no point at all, because the connections would have been broken. So how then would the message in the Quran come to us if there were gaps? And the gaps were there on purpose. It can never happen, but that is an example. But what is happening is with the Al-Quran al-Taqwini, which is the book of nature, the ayah, that is happening before our eyes. And we as Muslims are doing absolutely zero about it. It doesn't affect us, it doesn't disturb us, it doesn't cause us anxiety. What is happening is there are groups of non-Muslims in the world where it is causing pain and anger and anxiety. I'm not saying that there are no Muslims where it is disturbing them, of course, and that's why you are all here in Heartsea International. But I'm saying as a ummah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it's not affecting us. Because if we took up the role as Khalifa, then we are duty bound to do something about it. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us to study the natural world, to read the signs, we need to be able to read the signs like a book. That hence is called the Al-Quran al-Taqwini. It's not just the ulama that say this. Even the non-Muslims academia, past and some present, say that the natural world is like a book. But how can it be read like a book if we are seeing extinction happening across the world, where we are seeing biodiversity being totally destroyed, where we are seeing ecosystems completely disconnected? It is impossible. So that's why we gave the example of, just imagine the Quran. You open Surah Al-Fatiha, and many of the words, the ayah, were not there. It would be a total mess. But that is what's happening to the earth. And remember, the earth and every living creature on this planet is also Muslim and lives in the ummah just like us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it. So why do we need to rewild? Well, the first principle of Heartsea International is to rewire, and we covered an introduction to that yesterday. The second principle of rewiring, so of Heartsea International, is the reconnecting with nature. So we're following the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because throughout the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is focused on us connecting to the ayah, to the signs of creation. But how are we going to connect and to see if it's not there? And so life on Earth is experiencing total destruction. And we are now, as scientists say, and sadly there are not many Muslim scientists as biologists, ecologists, etc., human ecologists that are saying this, but we are now in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. And so it is our responsibility as Muslims to cultivate the earth. That is also in the Quran. There is so much to cover, but it's impossible in one session. Cultivation of the earth is our duty as vicegerents, as Khalifa. And all that I'm talking about is being done by our non-Muslim brothers and sisters. But they are doing what they can, but they are misguided. They think they are guided, but they are misguided because they don't have the full connection, which is the Quran. Alif Lam Mim Dhalikal Kitabu La Rayba Fihi Hudan Lil Muttaqin. We have the guidance, so we must turn to the Quran first, the revelation, and then turn to the ayah in the natural world. So rewilding is absolutely crucial for us to be able to understand the language of nature, to be able to read the Al-Quran al-Takwini. It's important for us because we should be acting as vicegerents in supporting our Muslim ummahs around the world. It's not just us as Muslims, and if we think that, and that's how we are thinking and operating, that is because of the conditioning and the mindset that we have been programmed to think like and to live in this Cartesian mentality, this Western view, this Dajjalic outlook that the natural world is to be used and abused. It's disconnected. It is there to be raped. Astaghfirullah. Whereas before the 17th and 18th century, the world saw the natural world in a completely different. So the tree, the Muslim, the sun, the insect, the flower is Muslim. And so when the natural world is crying out for help, we are blind and we are deaf. So rewilding is important for us to be able to read, to engage, to understand the Al-Quran Takwini, but also to help the natural world, which is also the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is our responsibility. Next slide, please. Understanding nature's processes, and this is why I often talk about, and it's one of our subgroups, and we'll be talking about this inshallah later on, inshallah, is we need to also understand ecological ecoliteracy, which enables us then to understand how to read the Al-Quran Takwini. We need to understand how do ecosystems operate. This is very important, okay? Because we are the Khalifa and we need to know how nature works. And so if you've been with me over the months now, you'll understand that I focus in our introductions on the principles of nature, How does nature work? How does nature survive? Obviously, it's coming and it's all controlled by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we need to understand this. We need to understand this to be able to read the language of nature in order to also to protect it, to prevent what is happening globally, and also to be able to cultivate the earth, because we're not saying we can't take from the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us aspects of nature, the natural resources to take, but to always maintain the balance. And that's where we also have explored in our introductions many times about, once we've understood the principles of nature, then we go into Islamic ecology. And as Khalifa, we must also understand Islamic ecology. Next slide, please. So we opened with the first slide. That is the ideal signs that we should be able to see. So if that opening slide was a real life situation, then we would be able to, I could take you out there as a guide and tracker, and I could enable you to help to read everything that was in front of you, because you could see the connections, you could see the relationships, you could see the diversity, you could see nature's processes working. And it starts with the interaction and the engagement. See how everything interconnects. Okay, so if we was talking about permaculture, and we talk about zone 00, we talk about the principle of interaction and seeing. Okay, see how it all connects as well. See how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continually talks about looking, seeing, and observing. But if I took you to a scenario, to an outdoor scenario like this, then it's completely different. Because what you are seeing here is what we are witnessing now across most of the world. Now, for some people who are blind and deaf, they may go for a walk in this particular type of environment, and they may think it's very beautiful. But this is an illusion. It's a crisis of perception of how we are seeing the world. Consider these facts. 90% of mammals on the face of this earth, okay, 90% of mammals on the face of this earth are us. 4% is wildlife. 70% of all birds on planet Earth are now domesticated. 70% of all birds on planet Earth are now domesticated. Chickens, geese, poultry. That shows you the current crisis that we are in. That shows you why rewilding needs to take place. So this slide here shows you the key message in this slide is the habitat that you see here with the hills, that you see 3 or 2 small areas of forest on the right, 1 on the left. So the key lesson here is this is unnatural. What you should see is those 3 square, isolated, disconnected areas of forests connected. Okay, the ecosystems should come together. So you're seeing disconnection. So that is disconnecting insects, that's disconnecting birds, that's disconnecting the whole of nature's processes. And what it is behind all of this? Insan. And so 90% of people today are living in the cities, are disconnected from the natural world. And so if they do go out into the natural world, they see a picture, a sight like this, and they think that this is natural, but this is not natural. This is not natural at all. And so again, as I was explaining yesterday, these are symptoms of a bigger crisis. Okay, because if I took you to this place live, it would be impossible for you and for me to be able to explain to you how to read this, shall we say, for example, this page of the Al-Quran Taqweeni, because there's no connections. The nature's processes have been disconnected. It would be like opening with Surah Al-Fatiha, and many of the words are just not there. A'udhu billah. And so a question that comes to me often is, then Sheikh, how do I read the Al-Quran Taqweeni? And the only way that you can read it is when we see an ecosystem, we go outside and we see everything as it should be, as we saw there in the first slide that we saw. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the responsibility as vicegerents, then it is our duty to re-establish biodiversity across the world. For us, it means to re-establish Muslim communities. We've been so programmed that we also think nature is separate, that the tree, the grass, the bird is just a thing, because it's been rammed into us. Of course, we are worried about our brothers in parts of the Muslim world and sisters, our brothers and sisters that are being oppressed and losing their lives. It's disturbing us. Shouldn't the state of the natural world also disturb us? But sadly, it's not. And this is why one of the key reasons why we've established Heartsea International. Because how can we deliver the message of La ilaha illallah, message of Tawheed, to the masses of humanity, which is our duty? Because the seal of prophethood has happened, there are no more prophets to come. It is our responsibility to deliver the message. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues throughout the Quran is commanding us to study, reflect the natural world. But if it's not there, then how can we deliver that message? That behind all of this is a creator. When we are part of the destruction, we are part of what is happening. And we shouldn't be. We should be the ones that are coming up with the solutions. Next slide, please. So break this connection we are doing, and it is at our peril. So remember, the earth is crying out for help, just like we see our brothers and sisters in war-torn zones across the Muslim world crying out for help. The natural world, which is also Muslim, is also crying out for help. So here, what do you see? Or what do you not see? Again, I've explained this. I don't see biodiversity. I don't see nature's ecosystems working in harmony. I don't see interconnection. I don't see relationships. And so this is why permaculture and the food forest, when we talk about off-grid living, it's so important. But I keep stressing that social permaculture has to come before that, because we've been conditioned to think this looks a beautiful scene, but it's not. And this particular slide, I can take you to many places in the UK today where people have gone on a holiday, where they've gone camping to places like this, and they will come back and they report it is a beautiful location, beautiful, beautiful highlands. But that is an illusion. This slide, which I can take you to the key places here in the UK, for example, is not natural. It has been created by mankind, and it's been created through farming. The landscape has been changed. It is now dominated by what we say is monoculture. It's dominated by grazing. It's dominated by the elite, the very few, the small percentage of people that would use an area like this, for example, in Scotland, here in the UK, for grouse hunting. The landowners have the power. We could take you to South America. We could take you all over the world, and we could talk about the same thing. But you can see how if 90%, if the research is showing that 90% of humans are now disconnected from nature, are urbanized, that for the few that want to reconnect and they see something like this, they think this is the natural world. It is not the natural world. So what do you see? I see a crisis. What do I not see? I don't see nature's processes, nature's ecosystem. I don't see, as I look at this slide, brothers and sisters, I don't see the Al-Quran al-Taqwini. How can I, as a guide and a tracker, how can I take you here and teach you how to read the Al-Quran al-Taqwini? We need to step up. And so Heartsea International takes us through the process. We have no understanding. We might as well just close the door and just shut ourselves off if we're not prepared to go through the rewiring first. If we are prepared to do that alongside reconnecting with nature, and when I say reconnecting with nature, I don't mean then go to places like this, but to go to places where nature's ecosystems are operating. And the key place I would say at the moment is to try and go to a forest. But even the forests are being destroyed. But for the moment, I would say avoid a scenario like this, avoid a landscape like this, and aim for a forest. Particularly if we are thinking about establishing a food forest, a forest garden, because we need to be able to mimic that wild forest. Next slide, please. People's places in nature. And so this is why, again, research, scientists, and I don't see many Muslims stepping up again, that now we have mental illness and depression and suicide, etc., etc. And I'm seeing this in my workplace every single day, not just amongst Muslims, but amongst the masses, that we now have nature deficit disorder. This is now an official mental disorder where thousands are depressed, they are feeling suicidal because they have been disconnected from the natural world. And what were we talking about yesterday? And what have I spoken about many times? And it's there in the Quran, because we have been disconnected from the natural fitra. How can we return to the fitra if we don't rewire? How can we return to the fitra if we don't reconnect? And how can we return to the fitra if there's nothing to return to, which is rewilding? And how can we become the Khalifa if there's nothing as vicegerents to care for? And so again, I want to read these figures. Consider these facts. 90% of mammals on Earth are predominantly us. 70% of all birds are now domesticated. And 90% of people on Earth are now living indoors. And articles are saying that insan is now an official indoor species. Did you hear what I just said? Official research has now confirmed that mankind is now an official indoor species. That's not returning to the fitrah. We are in a crisis, and we can continually leave it to the non-Muslims to do what they can, and they're doing what they can. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them towards the haqq. But we have the blueprint. You have to go to the Quran first. Then you connect that to the Al-Quran al-Taqwini. And it goes back, as we said yesterday, to Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Transform how you see the world. That everything you see is connected. And what's happening is, and there is good that's happening, is scientists are realizing, yes, things are connected, but they're not really understanding the full picture because they haven't got the guidance. Alif Lam Mim, Dhalika al-Kitabu la rayba fihi hudan lil-muttaqin. So they're just focusing on nature, and they're still looking at nature as things. So whether we look at climate change, question mark, we look at the environmental crisis, question mark, it's there, but we need to understand it from the Quranic perspective. You cannot solve these global issues that we are in, political, social, economic, environmental, unless you have that spiritual connection, and unless you can understand it from the Quranic lens. Next slide, please. So what is eco-literacy? Eco-literacy is to be able to understand the language of nature, to be able to understand how ecosystems work. And we start off by covering nature's principles. How does nature work? Okay, we need to understand this. We need to be able to teach this to our children. That is the first door in order to be able to read the language of nature. And this is taking place now with many non-Muslims, but they're not getting the full picture because they're not connecting it to the Quran. We have to go to the Quran first, then we go to the natural world. So when the first revelation came, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, as the ulama say, it was now, the transition was from Mecca to the cave. Now the transformation is connect the natural world and its signs. This is science with the revelation, and now deliver that to humanity. And how on earth, brothers and sisters, do you expect to go and live off-grid, to establish a food forest, to go on the journey of permaculture if you don't even know how to read the language of nature, if you don't know how to read the Al-Quran al-Taqwini, if you're not rewired, you don't connect to nature, you don't even see what is out there, what is correct and what is incorrect, and you don't even understand eco-literacy. There's a journey and a process that must happen. And this is why research again has shown that the majority of off-grid intentional community projects fail, not because they don't have the ideal plans, or they have the experience and expertise. It's because of internal conflict, which is the tazkiyah al-nafs. You and I have the blueprint, the Quran. The Quran. We don't need CNN. We don't need BBC. We don't need Sky News. The Quran covers everything historically. The Quran tells us everything that is happening now. And the Quran tells us everything that will happen in the future. Dear brothers and sisters, Islamic ecology, you have to understand fitrah, mizan, vicegerency, khalifa, tawheed. That is our responsibility. That's your responsibility as Muslim. The Muslim world, and I mean the Muslim world, not just our brothers and sisters in human form, but our insects, our trees, our flowers, our birds, the mountains, the sea, the oceans, the fish, the Muslim world, the Ummah, in a holistic understanding, is crying out for help. We need to step up. That is rewilding in its holistic understanding, and I hope we understand this. Next slide. How to read the Al-Quran Takwini. We've got to be able to see everything through relationships, through connections. And this is why I always, when I teach, focus on 3 key areas. Always work to understand relationships, patterns, and contexts. When we connect to the Quran, Revelation, or the Al-Quran Takwini. Relationships, patterns, contexts. Next slide. Responsibility lies with us. Okay. At the moment, as I was saying yesterday, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to keep the system going. We are not in the position, we're not qualified at the moment to step up to the role as vice chairmanship. But we have to, or we have to prepare the way for our children. That's our responsibility. And Heartsea International has been established to do what we can to take our brothers and sisters and our children on this journey, and the whole of Insan, because we are a dawah, we are a movement, we are a dawah movement. Please understand this, okay? We're trying to follow the Quran, we're trying to follow the Hadith, the Sunnah, the Seerah of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay? We are a dawah movement. You need to be able to explain to the non-Muslims what Islam is and what a Muslim is through Heartsea International, and I guarantee you that 99.9% would have never have heard this before. But it's there in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ was there. It's there in his Sunnah. Next slide. And that is the end. Half an hour just to give you an introduction to rewilding. So yesterday and today, rewiring and rewilding. If you have further questions, please contact me. Please contact Brother Hamidou in Bangladesh. Once again, Jazakallah Khair for his hard work, his continued hard work, and all of those that are helping Heartsea International, inshallah ta'ala. And please keep safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.